Welcome to the first episode of the Free Spirit Academy podcast. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini Yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Today I'll be talking to astrologer and nutritionist Marlena Torres, but before we dive into the conversation with Marlena, and because this is the kickoff of this podcast, I want to set you up with a little bit of background. So my own history before getting into eating psychology coaching was of intermittent bulimia, very non-intermittent binge eating disorder, obsessive dieting, and self-abuse. And as a little heads up, I am going to be talking briefly about my history with bulimia and with cutting, so if these are tender topics for you, you might want to just hop to the next episode. So I'll start with this. I don't really recall a time that food was not a thing. From about the age of 12-ish, there was never not a diet. And the diet existed as this shiny piece of hope that things would soon be okay and I could stop hating myself. So before I was even done growing, I was already swinging wildly from slim fast to calorie counting to raw foods and on and on. And the year after high school, I was working my 5th year of door-to-door missionary work. Yes, spreading the gospel along with vegetarianism. And when my boss at the time caught me cutting myself in the bathroom, he sent me off to a mental hospital. And this is not something I'm saying as a, look at this terrible thing that happened. It actually ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me because I then landed myself a job at a bookstore and began devouring every book I could, completely expanding my view of the world, of life, of spirituality, and food. And very shortly, I stumbled across this book called The Raw Food Detox Diet by Natalia Rose, and it was like electric in my hands. And I didn't know why, I hadn't even read it yet, but I just had this knowing that there was something in here for me. And my rational mind was just like, yay, this diet's actually going to work. And I felt something deeper, but I didn't know how to approach it any differently than any other extreme diet I'd taken on. So very all or nothing, trying to fix myself, and binge eating when I couldn't stick to the program. As I got to reading it, what resonated for me so deeply in the book was that it wasn't about counting anything or taking on these rigid diet labels. It was really just about what was in the way of me just being myself in my body. So rather than being another collection of superfoods or macronutrient ratios, it was about simplicity and just getting out of my own way, which appealed to me so much as I had taken on yoga recently, and this whole idea of if I just surrender and get out of my own way, wow, there's this flow. Wow, I just get to be myself. And so here I was seeing this connection between what I put into my body and being able to have that flow of just being myself. However, like all other diets that came before, I went for the obsessive and the extreme, and I spent another probably 10 years trying to perfect myself and detoxify my body to the extreme. And it was a perfect example that even something beautiful could be turned into disorder. And when it all finally became too much, when I'd reached every extreme possible, lost and gained the weight countless times, and saw Randy, you're just doing the same thing over and over and over, and it's not working for you, I had to give up. All the dieting, cleansing, detoxing, obsessing, perfecting, I gave up. And I just ate for the first time without judging myself and without judging the food. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever done this. However, it was with the intention of learning to trust my body. And with that intention and with no more rules and no more dogma, Interestingly, I very naturally found my way back around, and I will say this was after a couple of years of really just relaxing into myself and not following anybody else's protocol. I very naturally found myself embracing many of the principles that I'd fallen in love with and simultaneously battled with. So that's a very simplified version of that story, but my intention with this podcast is to point you towards freedom in your body, not freedom in a once my body's perfect, then I'll be happy kind of way, and not freedom in a fuck it, I'm going to eat whatever I want and I don't even care what the result is sort of way either, though that can be a really important period for those of us healing this painful food stuff. There are always more than two options, and real freedom requires us to see a bigger picture. So I want you to feel free in your body and free to be completely yourself. So as I talked to Marlena today, and this is somebody, by the way, who has shared a very tumultuous parts of this journey with me, I hope you'll see a glimpse of what it can be like to move beyond the black and white fear-based thing that we have going on with food and body. There are so many ways of understanding ourselves more clearly, and astrology has interestingly been one of those for me this year. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Marlena. Today we're going to talk about learning to care for and feed the body with intention, but without being a crazy orthorexic nut. We'll talk about how astrology took Marlena from obsessive dieting to listening to her body, how relaxing is far more supportive when learning to listen to the body versus obsessing over every little symptom or detail, and how knowing about your full birth chart is a purely positive thing. You're not going to find out that there's anything wrong with you or, anything crazy. You're only going to learn how to work with what's natural to you. So, Marlena, you and I feel like you are one of my dear friends, but I've never actually met you in real life. And it didn't honestly occur to me till this morning because I was thinking about, when did Marlena and I meet? And I was like, we haven't actually met, like not in real physical life.
It's really funny because I feel that I feel the same about you. And I have like a group of women I've met through, the online world, like Natalia Rose specifically, that I feel like I can't believe I haven't met some of these people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Feel like sisters to me.
It does. It feels like a sisterhood. So we met some amount of years ago that we were talking before this. We couldn't quite figure out what it was. But we both come from a background of a lot of detoxification and cleansing and nutrition work. And we've both been through a really interesting journey with it, where on the one hand, it really was a lifesaver physically. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, was kind of an emotional roller coaster. And so I think a lot of our early days of talking to each other, it was very like, oh my God, I'm going through this, or I can't lose the weight, or, sugar is so bad for me, I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. And sort of walking each other through things. And then you'd be good, and then I'd be good, and then you'd be panicking, and then I'd be panicking. And it was like years before either of us started to find any way of taking care of ourselves, I think, that was actually authentic to us rather than just
say like that honored us and wasn't about like, this is what you should be doing.
Yes. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear, and I would love for you to tell everybody what your journey was like with nutrition and detoxification. Like, who were you before you got into this? How was your physical and emotional health? How did you stumble into this? What was the journey like? What was the roller coaster like? And where are you at now? And feel free to share lots of details, lots of details. Give us the whole story.
Okay. So gosh, it's going back so far. It feels like in my brain, like it was really most of my adult life, I guess, that I had been kind of on this nutrition, like a real nutrition sort of journey, whereas like my goal was wellness. It wasn't to lose weight or look a certain way. I had kind of like dieted like most of my life, even going back into childhood. Like I always wanted to be thinner. So weight loss was a thing. But once I got to be I guess like 18, 19, I didn't want to eat red meat because I read about how like it was bad for your heart. And there was like heart disease in my family. And like, that's when I started to get, into all of that. I guess, I got into a macrobiotic diet. I guess I was around 22. Like I turned 21. I had way too much fun partying when I was 21. Like had a really fun year of life. And then I felt terrible. Cause I was like eating restaurant food most days and just really not taking care of myself. So that's when I also had like some digestive stuff going on. Just my stomach was like a mess. So I started doing like a whole foods diet and I got into macrobiotics, which I remember back then, all my friends were like, this is crazy. This is nuts. But all I was eating was like brown rice and vegetables. It wasn't really, that nuts looking back at it. And then a friend of mine actually told me about Natalia Rose's books because I was like, I feel like I need some fresh food. Like I'm not eating salads, I feel like I'm just eating all of these whole grains, which is, I guess back then that was like really amazing to do.
Yeah, it was a thing for a while. I remember when macrobiotic was big. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really, and I definitely felt better from doing it. And I even remember like, cause I was in college at the time and I remember, sometimes I would fast without thinking about it, like throughout the morning or like breakfast wasn't a normal thing for me because my stomach was so sensitive. I was just like, I don't want to really eat in the morning unless I have like some crackers or something. But I would find myself feeling like really focused and like my head being very clear and feeling like energized when I wouldn't eat. And I'm like, well, this is really interesting, because I feel like so much of the diet world is like, you want your biggest meal to be breakfast. So you have like all this energy and then, like lunch is smaller and like dinner is, I don't know if you ever heard this. It was like something I felt like was in all the magazines. Like you want to eat.
Oh, like eat like a king.
Yeah. And like
totally.
dinner like a pauper.
Yeah.
That. I was like, oh, okay. And whenever I would do that, I would feel like so disgusting. Like I always just never felt good after having like a big breakfast. It's just, so in many ways it was like an intuitive thing for me, the whole foods diet and the macrobiotics, but I still had a lot of issues. I would get headaches and my stomach was very like, I never knew if I was going to be like very bloated or uncomfortable. It was annoying. And emotionally I did not feel well. I liked like that I was smaller and kind of eating whatever I wanted. Whereas before it's like when I dieted normally, I really could never get lean. Like I was just like, so, and cause we know that like diet foods don't work and all that stuff. But I didn't feel really well emotionally. And like looking back at it, it's so hard for me to talk about it without like bringing astrology into it, because like looking back at like transits I went through and like understanding my birth chart, it's like, it kind of shifted everything for me in terms of understanding what I was going through, because when I was having all those issues physically, I was also like in college, which I'm the type of person that I feel like if I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have even gone to college. I was going to school to be a teacher, basically because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't really have the ambition to do anything more, I don't know, like something more intense than like going to school to be a teacher. I guess like, I don't know what else to do. It was very just like, whatever, like a very like, it's kind of sad, like looking back at it, just this feeling of like,
though,
it's very common.
It's very common.
Very common. Yeah. More common. I mean, I feel like everybody really goes through it at some level. And I feel like the thing that has always been kind of hard for me is like managing, like, I guess the way I approach food with like how I feel. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way, but it's like inevitably, like I would have these symptoms and I would kind of freak out about the symptoms and then get kind of nuts around food. I guess that's the best way to explain it. Because I have this, like, I take everything so seriously when it comes to like a symptom, or I tend to get really worked up about it. I'm not like a hypochondriac, but like my mom, who was a nurse, kind of jokes that I am, because like nothing really phases her, she's worked in ERs and everything. And like, I'll get like, a bump on my knee and it's like, should I go to was something wrong? And she's like, oh my gosh, that's nothing. but
but I think a lot of women in the health world are like that. Like a lot of us are very like every pimple and every like puffy face in the morning. Yeah. What does it mean? What did I eat? What was the thing? Yeah. It can become nuts.
And I think like I try to have a good perspective with it. Like I'm in tune and I want to be listening to my body, and that's why I'm acting this
absolutely.
way. 'Cause I know a lot of people who don't pay any attention to it. They're kind of better at going about life no matter how they feel.
Right.
You know, like
because they're relaxed.
Yeah. And I think that some people, you know, depending on, you know, personality and I guess their constitution and everything, can do better. You know, they can get things done even if they have like a migraine, like my mom,
right.
or they can work through pain better, I guess. Whereas like when I feel like I'm not physically well or I'm tired, it's just hard for me to really be effective at all at anything.
Yeah.
And I guess that is true with everyone as well. But anyway, I feel like
it's interesting. No, it's great. This sort of maybe loosely ties into something that makes me think of Janine Roth. Did you ever read the Janine Roth books, Women, Food and God and all that?
I did read that one. I haven't read, I think she has other ones I haven't read, but
She's got
I did read that one.
Loads of them. Yeah, that's kind of the big one. But she talks about how there are two kinds of dieters, or did she say dieters? Like two kinds of women when it comes to issues with food. And she calls them restrictors and permitters. And the restrictors are the people that like can restrict everything, are really, really great at their diets, but are like crazy. And then the permitters are like the can't even look twice at it, just eat whatever I want, don't put any restrictions on it, and just move through life. But it's at the same time, like there's a downside to either, because the one is no mindfulness whatsoever, and their bodies could be absolutely falling apart. They can't even bear to look at it. And then the other is like obsessive mindfulness, if you can even call it that. And it's completely uptight and completely neurotic. And I think that finding our center and our middle path, there's quite a journey to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because I feel like I can identify, and you probably know from us speaking in the past, like I can identify with both the restrictor and the permitter, because I've definitely done both things. And I've, of course, noticed a few times in my life where food has kind of been a non-issue. It's always been when I'm feeling very focused with how I spend my day and just feeling very centered and grounded in my body and clear in my head. That's always, and when I say non-issue, it's so weird because like, I feel if you're going to be health conscious, if you're going to eat well, food can never really be a non-issue, because you have to put some consciousness into like, okay, if I'm going to eat something good today, I have to make sure I have fresh stuff, you know, like
it's true.
And that alone can be
totally
somewhat
agree.
Annoying and stressful.
Right.
You have to shift the way you look at it though.
Yeah, but I think that's with anything. Anytime you're going to do something new, there's a little bit of annoying, like, okay, this is a new thing. I can't be on autopilot right now.
Yeah.
And one of the big things, because we both come from Natalia Rose's teachings, I remember her saying that you can't eat intuitively because we don't live in an intuitive world. And I agree and I disagree. I think that there's a lot of room for eating intuitively and still taking care of yourself. But I also see where she's coming from. Like we can't just sort of be on autopilot, because we live in a world that's so unnatural and that doesn't set us up to feel good. So like you're saying, if you want to feel good, you have to put a little thought into it.
Yeah. And effort and time. And I think, especially now that I have kind of veered off the course of what I was doing so religiously for so many years, not so many, but for several years. And even after my daughter was born, when it was really very hard to keep doing those things, I kept doing those like juicing and
tell me about that. So you got into it. You started feeling better. You got into this sort of cleansing, detoxification work.
Yeah.
And you started feeling
great.
better.
I felt great when I first got I remember the first time I had a green juice. I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. I was so scared to drink it because I'm like, this is going to make me sick to my stomach. And I thought it was going to be disgusting. It was amazing. And I just was like obsessed with juicing. I juiced so much for the first 3 months. I it was like a really cheap juicer. I don't even remember what brand it was. It was like $60 at Target. And I broke it. And I remember freaking out like, oh my God, I broke the juicer. And I had to go, I got the Breville, and it's like, I was just so into it. And I remember feeling high after, I had my first colonic at, now it's, I think, Detox, but it was called Light at the time in New York City. I was just like, I'm sold. Like, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. Like, I just felt so good initially. And, it's funny because it felt so natural to me. Like, I remember my friend telling me about Natalia's books. At the time she had the two. There was the Raw Food Detox Diet and the Life Force Energy books.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can't choose. I'm getting both. And I actually had a gift card that was like the exact amount, almost like to the cent for both of those books.
Oh my God, amazing.
And I'm like, I'm just getting them both. This is so
Isn't
fabulous.
it funny? I feel like this is such special work, and the people that get into it, like you find out about it and you feel like you're home. That's how I felt I felt that way with the cleansing work, and I felt that way with Kundalini Yoga. Those are the two things that I came to, and instantly I was like, oh, I'm home. And even though I went through all sorts of obsessive, tumultuous stuff, I found my way back home, and it was authentic. Yeah. And, for me, I couldn't follow somebody else's plan, but yes, like the heart of it, the core principles, yes, they're home.
And, it's funny with Kundalini Yoga. Is it Kundalini or Kundalini? I don't even know how to say it.
Kundalini.
Kundalini. Yes. I thought it was. Yeah, I actually, I don't want to get too like off on it. I know you don't care because
I love this
talk and it's fun. But when I was 17, I got in a really bad car accident. I talked about this a bit once with you on that thread on that page. But anyway, I feel like something shifted in I was unconscious. I don't remember a block of time where I was like talking and doing stuff. But anyway, I had this like weird shift afterwards where like I wanted to meditate and do yoga. And before that I was very much like your typical, like, teenager. But yeah, these meditations that I got, it was like meditation is medicine, they were called. I should look them up because they were actually like audio cassettes because this was in 2000. And I guess that's what people still use audio cassettes. But they were Kundalini meditations. And I remember years later, I had a client actually who was a Kundalini yoga teacher, and she gave me this audio. She would make music, and I'm listening to the mantras of what she's saying. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I listened to this before. That was like my introduction to meditation were these, but anyway, I just thought that was funny.
Well,
not funny, but just interesting.
I know that it's so interesting. And I love the meditation is medicine thing, because truly of all the stuff that we do, the yoga, the meditation, the cleansing, the only thing that's truly medicine is our own presence. Like being able to be completely home for ourselves. And that's why we even bother with the physical cleansing stuff. It's why we bother with the meditation. It's sort of removing everything that's in the way of what's not really us, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So yeah, that's the only medicine that there is.
Yeah, I totally really like that. I really like the way you put that. I totally agree. Because even like with cleansing, it's like, I was just actually thinking about this today, because I still at times have these periods where I'm just like, this cleansing thing is not for me. Like, I'm still very much like, it's like a daily sort of like coming into it and understanding it. But I'm going to get into how it, like, I got off like kind of nuts with it.
Tell me about, because I know for both of us, it got into definite orthorexic territory, because I don't think that healthy eating in itself is orthorexia. And I know that that's not true, because I've been on both sides. I really think that you could have two people side by side doing the exact same thing. Like one person could be drinking juice and eating salads and happily, creating art and enjoying their family. And the other person could be drinking green juice and counting calories and obsessively worrying about their food combinations. And that person is orthorexic. Like from the outside, it could look the same, but on the inside, the experience is totally different. So what was your experience like where it got into sort of orthorexia territory?
Well, when I first got into it, it felt so natural. Like I devoured Natalia's books in a weekend. I made pumpkin pie in a bowl and was like crying. I was so happy. I'm like, this is the most amazing thing. I felt so like hydrated and happy and light, but like totally satisfied. I'm like, why am I just now like coming to this? It's like, I wish my whole life, this is what I was eating. And so anyway, it was really great. And then, once the whole candida thing came into play, I feel like I blamed all of my life's problems on candida and then just became like a complete maniac about like not having any sugar or fruit, or which is I enjoyed like a pretty deep, like banana ice cream was like my life at that point. Like I loved it. It was like I was eating mostly raw and I felt so great. Not because I wanted to eat mostly raw. Like I wasn't even on
right. Like not
whole,
raw
like,
food for the sake of raw food, but
yeah,
you
like
felt great.
Yeah, like I liked it better than the cooked food. I thought it had more flavor. I felt better after I ate it. It just felt more creative and was more beautiful. And like overall, I just was like, this is amazing. And it was spring and summer. Like it was, warm. So it felt all very natural and nice, So yeah, once I went into the whole candida thing, and it, you start reading about this stuff. And this is where I feel like astrology is very helpful for me in understanding, even though at the time I feel like I was so steeped in all of this, it was hard for me to see through it. And I was just getting into astrology, but understanding myself now, I have such an active mind. Like I need so much, I love information, but I can kind of get wrapped up in it. Like anyone else can get wrapped up in their thoughts. And then it's like, I can't come back to center. It's like, I feel like I can be so grounded and like, even like extremely wise at times. Like I find myself like there's this person in me that is so like able to see through all the bullshit and is so able to be like, this is what's true for you. This is what makes sense. Why are you making everything so complicated? It's very easy for me if I'm not like giving my mind what it needs for it to become kind of like obnoxious and just like, like reading this information, like, oh my gosh. So like you took birth control pills for this many years. You are messed up like for life, like my mom was a nurse and gave us, medicine for everything. I'd been on antibiotics so many times. Like I'm screwed. You know what I mean? Like there's IBS in my family and colitis in my family and cancer. Like my genetics are horrible. I'm screwed. Like I can basically just live off, leafy greens for the rest of my life. And I just got kind of nuts with the whole thing. And then once I added in the fact that I wasn't as lean as I wanted to be, it's like when you initially I think this happens to a lot of people when they first get into like a cleaner diet, you lose weight effortlessly.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so nice because you're like, I love this food and I look great and I feel great. And then once you start to like kind of level out, maybe gain back a little bit, or you're eating more like comfort foods because it's not as exciting anymore, the new diet, it's like I think that I got kind of like, well, if I'm going to be this person, who's juicing and doing all this, I need to be perfect. I need to do it perfectly and I need to look a certain way. And I certainly don't want to have cellulite. Like that's disgusting. And like this whole, like, it became very like, okay, like if I am doing all this and I don't look better than like this person, or like this person is eating like McDonald's and her body is perfect, like that's unacceptable. It was like this thing. And again, like astrology, like understanding my birth chart really like shed a lot of light on why I would think this way, or like why I really was not. And, it all comes down to like just not being aligned with who you are. Like we all have like, everything, with astrology and with everything. Astrology is like my favorite lens to look through everything. Like it's my favorite way to interpret, the way the universe, is speaking to us. I don't think you need astrology to understand, why people do the things they do. It's just, for me, it's like my guide. Like it's a nice way to be like, oh, it's painting the picture of what's happening.
So did you have astrology at the time that you were really struggling with this?
I did. And, it's so funny how even with astrology, I felt like I kind of was hung up on like the more difficult aspects of my chart, because I have some like really obvious like things in my chart that would like contribute to having a poor body image, or not valuing yourself, or taking like health so seriously and how you look so seriously. And I'm just like, God, like I'm never going to escape this. But there's a light and a dark to everything, really.
Absolutely.
With astrology and with everything in life. And really, it's like I understand it now as like a part. This is going to be the thing, and it has been the thing that's really taken me like to the darkest parts of myself.
Yes,
but it's also been like an area that I'm in a way I'm mastering. I wouldn't say that I'm a master, but I've learned a lot. I've come very far in the past 10 years, and not just in terms of like my knowledge or like my diet, but just like my understanding of what the way I nourish myself, like what it does for me,
right,
and how it contributes to how effective I am, how creative I am, and how I'm like aligning with my like highest expression, which is what I like to focus. I mean, that's really like the
right, because
point
that's the point of knowledge and diet, right? Is to align you with your truest self. Yes, of everything, of astrology, of any of it. It's just all about you aligning with your highest potential, you being yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of times when I talk to people about astrology, it can be very like, I want to know what's going to happen. Like, when is this going to happen? And I always try to like bring people back to like focusing on the goodness of their chart, like the goodness of who they are, like what I see, and like how to better align with the highest expression, because then all the stuff that you want is going to happen quickly. Or if maybe what you want isn't ideal for you, maybe there's something even better. I always try to focus on that.
Because like you said, it's true. There's a dark and a dark side and a light side to absolutely everything. And I feel like with a lot of, I mean, even some person could get their birth chart read or whatever. And the person looking at it could tell them like, well, you need to watch out for this and you need to look out for that. And this is your weakness. And this is that. And I've seen this a lot with, the Enneagram. Are you into the Enneagram at all?
No, what is that?
I don't think I quite understand it, but it's another tool for self-knowledge, and there are different types, and you are among the numbers of, I think there's 8 of them. I don't know. I should not speak to any like knowledge about this. But the people who are into it can be really like, this is what you need to watch out for this type, and this is what you need to watch out for this type. And I'm like, no, there's gotta be like gifts in all of this, like beauty in all of it. And it's not like we need to cover anything up or paint a pretty like positive thinking coat over everything. But like you said, if there is a dark and a light side, then we need to be looking at it holistically.
Yeah. And, I don't even see the point, like, I don't see the point in focusing on what you have to look out for, because that stuff just happens anyway. It's like, there's so much like bad stuff that happens. Why would you, I feel like the more you look out for it, the more it happens, whereas you can be like, where's the strength in this?
Right. Exactly. And if you're not judging it, it's like, oh, that's a bad thing, but like, oh, that's a thing that I need to be curious about, or that's a thing that I need to explore more deeply. Rather than just being like with food, rather than food being good or bad, it's food makes me feel this way, or food makes me feel that way, or this has this effect and that has that effect. And it lets us be discerning rather than just slapping the good or bad label on anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that that's one of the things that appeals to me so much about the work that you do, is how it's like you always want to dig deeper. And it's like, it can be really dark and heavy and like scary, but it lightens things.
Absolutely. I mean, like
any you ignore it, it's still there.
Exactly. No, I don't believe in painting a glossy coat over everything. Yeah. And yet I like my work and my message is pure hope. Like anything that any client brings to me, no matter how awful they think that they are, or how terrible they think that they've been, or how much of a lack of willpower they have, like I can always look at it and be like, oh, like, yeah, that's not that big a deal. It just hurts. Is all. Like, you are not a bad person. You're just going through something that hurts, and there's more understanding needed here. That's it. And you can bring so much lightness to what is without getting rid of what is.
Exactly. And I always and I really believe this. I really feel like the more it hurts, or the deeper you're in it, like the exact opposite is possible. So like that much greatness and goodness is available. Like that there's that like space between. It's like I guess like moving, like the space between like where it's like polar opposites, I guess. And I guess it just, like it's not even like, I don't know how I want to express this, but it's like, it's not like going from one point to the other, but it's like, if you feel this bad, the opposite is also
exactly. It's like growth is not a linear line. It's so much more multifaceted than that. Yeah. I see where you're going with that. So are there concrete ways that you were able to use astrology as you were trying to figure out like, okay, how do I take care of myself? How do I feed myself without being an obsessive nutcase, and also without just like not caring at all?
I don't know if I would say like concrete ways. There were some very like basic things. Like I understood like with like what my rising sign was. Like my approach to things can be.
Yeah. Tell me, I guess, maybe specifically what you learned about yourself that you were like, I needed to know this about myself in order to feel balanced in this area of my life.
Okay. Well, one thing that I definitely learned about myself, and, you know, it took time for me to really see it. It's so interesting because it's like, I've been learning about astrology almost as long as I've been doing the whole cleansing thing. Like they really both came to me around the same time, but it's like, I've learned a lot of things, but I wasn't able to even see it in myself or like understand how I was expressing it, I guess, for a while. It's so weird, like how really just like as time goes on, you know, I guess you just become more self-aware and you're like, oh, okay, this isn't a good thing, or this is what's happening. But like a very basic example would be like understanding my rising sign. It's very easy for me to just.
And what is, for people who don't know anything about astrology, what is your rising sign?
Rising sign. Okay. So your rising sign is based on the time that you were born. You have to know at least like the window, like an hour to 2 window of the time you were born. Sometimes, you know, you can like guess it. Like my husband, for example, I don't know his exact birth time, but I know for sure it was within this window because, anyway.
And if you don't know your birth time, can you still get anything out of astrology?
You sure can. Yeah, you definitely can. It's not, you won't get as much, like things with transits and such would be hard, but like you would still be able to know, your sun sign. Your moon sign might be tricky, but I'm sure you'd be able to figure it out because, like for example, like the day I was born, the moon was in Gemini all day. So if I didn't know my birth time, I would have known for sure, you know, that my moon sign was Gemini. If I'd been born the day after, then it could have been Gemini or Cancer. And that would have been
a little more complicated. Okay.
It would have been, but like at the same time, like the signs that are next to each other are so different. Like I would have had to be completely not self-aware to not know that Gemini moon.
Okay.
But yeah, you would know your Mercury, Venus, Mars, all that stuff you would know. So you would still have a lot of insight into your personality.
Give us the basics. Like what is your sun sign, your moon sign, your rising sign, and then what are they specifically for you and how has it impacted you knowing them?
Okay. Well, let me go back to the rising sign because that was a big deal for me. I mean, it all is, but the rising sign is how you approach things. It's, and some people will even call it like your mask. And it's funny because that's exactly what it feels like to me when I think about my rising sign is the sign Virgo. And
it's like your personality, right?
It's how people see you, you know, and it's sometimes astrologers will be able to have a good guess on your rising sign just based on how you look, like facial features.
That's so interesting.
I'm not great at that, but I have successfully guessed a few rising signs. And it's always like so exciting when that happens. But anyway, so like with my rising sign being Virgo is like typically very health conscious because Virgo wants to purify everything and make everything perfect. They get a bad rap for being perfectionists, Virgos.
And I can see the dark and light in that, right? Like you could be so very detail oriented and
they are. Yes.
Yeah. And at the same time, you could like drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And Virgo is extremely detail oriented and sees all the imperfections because they're fixers. They want to fix things. They want to improve things. And I think the light of it is that they are so like their heart in their hearts, they want to be of service. Virgo does. But when it becomes neurotic, they just, you know, I feel like it just needs the right outlet. You know, it needs something that's helpful or, you know, not the body. It's very easy to just, you know, look in the mirror and be like, okay, that's not perfect. Like,
absolutely.
Like it's,
and then all of a sudden, all of your problems are about your body in your mind.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's a very easy because it's on the surface and it's very easy to say like, well, my body's not right. So as long as I get my body right, then I'll be happy.
Exactly. And like the way people see me, I want people to see me a certain way. You know, like this is the way I should be coming across to people, or this is even how I want to come across to people. And it's interesting for me because like, I don't have Virgo elsewhere in my chart. I relate so much to Virgos, but I don't feel like it's within me, like deep inside of me. I don't really feel like a perfectionist. I feel like details actually annoy me sometimes, but that's because I have so much Taurus in my chart, and Taurus is like very easygoing and overall, I mean, they can be really stubborn and, when they get angry, like watch out. But overall, it's a sign that, needs, sensory pleasures.
Well, it's true. And it is funny. And you and I have talked about this, like when I've worked with you before, because I'm a Taurus and I used to not relate to that at all, which really speaks to the importance of knowing your entire birth chart. But I can now see that I am indeed both stubborn and easygoing, because when I was in my obsessive phase with food and I was going to do a 90-day juice fast, nobody else was going to tell me that I was not going to do that 90-day juice fast. But I was also like not making a big deal out of it, like just going to do it. No big deal. And so like nobody was really that worried because I wasn't appearing neurotic. I was totally relaxed.
Yeah.
So it is, it's a funny thing.
It's and with the sun sign, and it's interesting, like, talking to you, we are like, we're so different in so many ways. And it's because like our charts like are really very different. We both have the Taurus sun sign. And we both even have moon signs that are in an air sign, but we still are just very different, like throughout the rest of our charts. And it's like, astrology is so much more than your sun sign, but like your sun sign is very important. Like understand that I'm a Taurus, and Tauruses love food. It's not just food. They love anything that is, that pleases the senses. They want things to smell good and look good, and they love to make spaces beautiful. Like that's their thing. It's all about enjoying the physical, enjoying the material.
And that is not an unspiritual thing.
Exactly. And that was something that's like, I was in this, headspace of constantly feeling like I needed to be on a juice cleanse. That's not going to work well for someone who has like 3 of her major like personal planets in Taurus. Like it's not, plus, even having my Venus for me is in Cancer, and Cancer is another sign that's really like attached to food in a way. And it's very different from Taurus. It's much more about like comfort and nourishment. But like I have all this stuff in my chart that like wants food and like wants to be like comforted by food. And I was being so mean to myself for needing that, when that was just like something that a very simple thing about myself.
When you realized that, were you angry or upset? Like, no, I need to do this and I need to do this.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I was frustrated. And a part of me felt kind of like, well, that's not fair, because I have all this. And then I have like this Virgo rising that just wants to like never eat again and just have all the green things. And, so it's like, we're such like complex creatures,
It's true. And I think that that's okay. Like, I think that all of these things, if people don't know anything about astrology or any, like this could sound complicated, but really the more that we grow, the more we're able to encompass something beyond just like black, white, right, wrong, good, bad. And diets sort of keep us in that headspace of like, you can be right or you can be wrong. You can be on the wagon or you can be off the wagon. But as you really grow an understanding of yourselves, actually, that's quite accurate, because we're kind of a crowd inside, and you can be a totally sane individual and know every aspect and every facet of yourself. And it becomes this wild, amazing adventure. So yeah, we are complex and it's exciting, and it's okay if we don't understand every facet.
Yeah. That's just very even like, I mean, I totally agree with everything you just said. And even like with like looking at a birth chart, like everything I just told you might sound confusing, because like if someone's never looked at a birth chart or they don't know anything about astrology, like it's even like so much more complicated than that. Like I have like Pluto and Saturn in my second house, which is like Taurus's house. I'm not saying this to confuse you, but it's like, it gives like my like Taurus energy, this kind of like serious and dark expression at times. Like Taurus is all about ease. And you have that too in your chart, like having your sun in the 8th house. Like the 8th house is all about like transformation and death and rebirth. Like it's like this intense like Taurus thing, but it's like, you're still a Taurus. So it's like, we really are like, there's so much going on, and it's never as simple as like, oh, well, I'm a Taurus. And I was the same way as you. When I would read about Taurus, I'm like, that doesn't sound like me, other than the food stuff.
Yeah,
I
for
love to
years, I
eat.
just thought it was total bullshit. I was like,
Yeah.
and I didn't even get that I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not stubborn. That's ridiculous.
I didn't think I was stubborn either.
Yeah, but my stubbornness is in that and my wife told me this at one point, and it was, I think, when the Taurus stuff started clicking for me, because I wondered, like, I was like, how can you be with me? Because she's very, like, she's a professor. We're very, very different. And she's like, at some point I just realized that you were going to do what you were going to do. And I was going to have to be all right with that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. When I decided to do
so
it,
funny.
I'm going to do the thing. And so, yeah, my stubbornness just comes off as very, very lighthearted, but it is indeed stubborn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, and I sense that with you too. And it's, I think it's like, it's not a bad thing. It's, I feel like it's kind of fun to like stereotype astrologically sometimes because it's funny, but, there is like the good side of being stubborn is that you're very determined, like when you want something, you make it happen, you figure out a way to make it happen. So yeah, it's really, it was, I guess, learning. And the thing with like learning about your birth chart and like, I feel like it comes to you like in layers, like you can look at your birth chart and see like, okay, this is what's happening. This is me. But it's like, you get it on like a deeper level with time. And it's almost like when you said like talking to yourselves or listening to yourselves,
yeah, totally.
It's like, I actually, like, I really do that. And it's like, I mean, it sounds like psycho, but it's like, I do not talk to myself, but a lot of times, like if I'm and I think sometimes this can be like having, like I have a very strong, like Gemini influence in my chart, and Gemini is so different than Taurus. And it's just like always talking and like chatterbox and always thinking and processing and teaching. And it's like this constant, it's very like mentally and just very active and changeable. Whereas Taurus is like about ease and it's like a fixed earth sign. Like it's so solid and, yeah.
Yeah.
I like to like,
it's good to know those parts of yourself because then you can sort of know like which part of yourself is running the show in any given moment and how to bring balance to that.
Exactly. And how to appreciate all parts of yourself. Yes. Like for the longest time.
So glad you said that.
Yeah. Like I hated the Gemini part of me because it, in a way, and it still does kind of make me feel like thrown off. Like when I was teaching in a public school, I remember like I changed my mind completely about what I was going to do at the end of the year so many times. And that's very like Gemini. They completely change their mind like all the time. Like they're just always changing. But I'd be like, okay, I'm not coming back. I cannot do this. This is terrible. And it's like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to go back and get my master's and maybe I'll be able to make this type of salary. And it's like the most insane, like, but anyway, back to what I was talking about with like, if I am trying to meditate and I feel like I just can't still my mind, which sometimes happens. And that can be very common for people with a lot of air in their chart or that have like a strong air emphasis. And especially like Gemini, it's like the chatterbox. Like, I feel like I have all these people inside me talking. So I just listen and I talk to them and it's like, I get calm. And if I can't do it through just sometimes writing seems to be just a thing for me. And that's typical with the Gemini as well. But I feel like I can get all of that noise out and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's the gold nugget or whatever. Like there's the insight. Yes. This is what, and I've actually started to notice. And I think like, this is something that I've learned about myself with time from understanding my chart, especially like having like so much Taurus and then all this, like this Gemini moon and my North Node happening. It's like, it's so like, I always felt like this is not fair because these two signs are so different. It's like I have two parts of myself that are like, just want to do totally different things. And what happens is it reminds me of, I don't know if you read the book Big Magic by Liz Gilbert.
Yeah. Yep.
You know how she talks about creativity. Yes. And obviously the whole book's about creativity, but she talks about creativity as like needing an outlet, kind of like a dog that will like chew up your house if you don't let them out. I think she might have like used that analogy. I don't know. But for me, it kind of like my Gemini energy has been this thing that I've learned is kind of like how she describes creativity. It's this part of me that needs an outlet. Otherwise, it's going to be a jerk. Like it's going to make me very like it's going to make me obsessive. It kind of feeds into that whole, like that, what we're talking about with Virgo being kind of like obsessive and picking things. It's like, it can trick me because Taurus is like a slower, more trusted, like Taurus likes to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and just wants peace. Whereas Gemini is like, I need stimulation. I need to talk. I need to teach. I need to have friends and be social. Like,
right. And that's
all
not
of this.
bad.
It's
like,
not bad.
So it's not like this part of you is a jerk. And so we need to get rid of it or we need to hate it or whatever. It's like, okay, so this part of me gets grumpy. Like, how can I work with that? It's so understanding.
This part of me needs, like, it's such a spirited sign and it's not a reliable energy. Like Gemini is not reliable at all. And then it's like, I feel like, especially with the Taurus and the Virgo, I want this, like, I need to feel like I'm dependable. But part of me is not dependable at all, you know? So if I'm going to flake on someone, that's just, it happens, you know, it's not that I want to do that, but it's like, it's this part of myself that I didn't like. And I had to come to terms with the fact that this is part of who I am. And the more I write, the more I make sure that I have time to talk to my friends and be very, like, in a way, like, I guess I would look at it this way as a Taurus, especially like the Virgo rising, that it can be almost like childish. Like I don't like having too much responsibility. Like it really will depress me to the point where I feel like I'm depressed. Like I have nothing to say, nothing. It's like you're it's like shutting a part of yourself down, and you can't do that and expect to feel well.
Oh,
you know?
my God.
You can't you can't. So it's like
part of yourself down, or like when people talk about their shadow side, or
like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, there is no,
it's
like
not.
I always say that shadow, like a shadow is just casting a shadow over light. So that means that there is light when the shadow moves away for you to see the whole picture clearly. Like there is nothing wrong with anything, nothing wrong with any part of you or me or anybody listening. It just all needs to be seen clearly.
Exactly.
And understood and loved, really, really, really loved. Like when I work with women on body image and emotional eating and binge eating and all of that, I try and simplify getting to know these different parts of ourselves just with an example of, like, you know how sometimes there's one part of you that is like, yeah, you know what? I can rock this body. I can go out and I can feel good and I can be confident. And then there's this other part of you that looks in the mirror and is like, oh my God, I hate myself. My cellulite is terrible. I want to die. And these parts feel totally legit, like both of them. And so it's not about pretending that the one part of you isn't real or doesn't count, or, you know, we need to gloss over it or get rid of it. It's about loving that part of you, because that part of you is really scared. There's a reason why she feels the way that she does. So there's just no need to shut any part of you down. And everything you're saying is so beautiful and so perfect and much more nuanced and individual for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really feel like, I almost feel like what I do with astrology, the way I approach astrology, it's really just like a guide for me when I enter a conversation with a person. Like if I'm working with someone, or just like thinking about like what's going on with me right now, or talking to anybody about their chart. It's really just like a guide, and it kind of can be like, okay, well, explaining things to people, and it kind of gives them a reason or an understanding as to why something's happening. And I think that can really kind of ease people's minds and make them feel better about whatever they're experiencing. I mean, I know my whole motivation, aside from just like curiosity with astrology, was that I really wanted to understand like suffering. Like why am I suffering? Why do bad things happen? And it's like, you know, life is unfair. But it's nice to see, I guess, themes that you live out and how you can shift them.
Yeah.
You know,
and there's a huge difference. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just by, you know, like understanding, you know, the stories in your chart and understanding how you can really shift it to a positive, because like we've been saying the whole time, you know, wherever there's that heaviness or that darkness, there's the light, brightness too.
Yes, absolutely. And there's such a difference. And you gave such a good example of it between saying like, life is unfair, and then just like stop. Or there's like, life is unfair. There's gotta be some more to understand here, which is exactly what you're doing. And I wanted to ask you about something. What were you saying just a moment ago? So you wrote this incredible post on astrology and the body and like being in a woman's body and what that can be like. And you likened it to sort of being under a spell, especially when we're growing up and sort of what we're conditioned with. Do you mind if I read a couple sections of that and then get your take on it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. It's a bit of a chunk, but I just like, it was hard for me to narrow down. I was like, oh, this is so good. And for those listening, I'm going to leave the link in the show notes for you to go and read this whole post, but I'm going to read a couple sections. So you say, the idea of perfection in a body is a lie. It's a lie that's been sold to us since we were little through magazines and television shows. We fell under the spell. We never had a chance. The spell is made more potent the more perceptive you are as a kid, noticing the hypocrisy and feeling the meaninglessness behind so many of the norms of this world, feeling the meaninglessness that comes with living in a culture that values production and profits more than it values life. And then in another section, you say, for most of us, it seems like we fell under a spell wherever we first started feeling that our bodies were wrong because they were too big, too awkward, too different from what we saw on TV or in magazines. It often happens around puberty, but for some of us, it's even earlier. Coming out of the spell happens slowly from what I've seen. It may start when you give up dieting, cleansing, and workout plans. Perhaps you throw out your scale, you're free, you've been saved until you remember that you still have your skinny jeans folded up on the top shelf of your closet. You can still measure yourself. You can always reduce yourself to numbers, and you can always keep the dream in front of you, the perfect dream, your salvation, being skinny, light, free, glowing, flawless. And maybe this dream makes the mundane more bearable because you trust that one day the dream will be real. The truth is that an empowered woman would never be able to fall under a spell. She's too in love with the moment, too in love with herself, with life, to be put under a spell. Whew. So
weird. I've never heard someone read something that I wrote before. So that was really weird.
I was
cool.
thinking,
I liked it.
like,
you read
as
it really
I read
well.
this, I was like, I bet this would be weird if somebody read back to me something I wrote. I'd probably hate it. But
no, I loved it. It was actually, I feel like special.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
I have to say though, like before you say, like my like working with you, like really inspired a lot of that post. Like it was really interesting for me, like, because you gave me the whole, the queen and the princess and how the princess is under a spell. I was going to
talk about this earlier. And that's what I was talking about with like the part of you that hates your body and the part of you that's like, yeah, I'm totally confident. I put those under the categories of like, there's a part of you that's like a princess and she's been put under a spell. And there's a part of you that's like a queen and she sees the big picture, and the big picture, sees beyond shadow and confusion. But yes, so that's the simplified version.
And, it's funny because I talked to you, like when you explained that to me, I was just like, wow, like it's kind of like when I think of like the queen, it's funny because I think of it as kind of like the really wise, like part of myself that I was talking about earlier, that I feel like when I write,
exactly what I was thinking about.
I can get all the noise out and then it's like, there's the queen. And it's funny because I have like in my birth chart, so many planets in my 9th house, and the 9th house, I have my sun sign. All my Taurus planets are in the 9th house, and the 9th house is a sign of like the sage. So it's like a very wise, like, it makes sense that someone with so much Taurus in the 9th house would have this whole like philosophy around life that is based around like food and nature. But it's like, that's what I'm meant to be like living out. Like your sun sign is like, this is what you're meant to learn about and express. Like, this is you shining bright, and like me being able to tap into that part of myself is it's a major thing for everybody. But for me, it's almost like this like constant struggle, not a constant struggle, but this constant like quest. Cause the sun is like, it's like the hero's journey, and that's like, the more I can tap into that part of myself, the more like heroic I'm going to be. And the more I'm going to be like living the dream, like aligning with who I really am and aligning with my truth, expressing my truth. But yeah, after I talked to you, I was actually gifted through a friend, an astrology reading with my first like astrology teacher. And the whole reading to do with me. Adam Ellenbass.
Oh yeah. Okay. I follow him because of you.
Yeah. I love him. He's really wonderful. But he will like keep it real with you when you talk to him. He never paints a pretty picture unless, he likes people to be aware of like anything tough that could be coming up. So I was like nervous to talk to him, but I'm like, I have to, because I was going through all these changes. And he pretty much talked to me the whole time about a major Neptune transit that I'm going through that was really kind of like characterizing all this stuff I was going through. And Neptune is a planet that is, and that's what the my blog post talks about Neptune and how it can make things very foggy, like you don't see things clearly. And I had all these things in my life, and I'm still kind of in this, transitional place where I feel like I'm kind of getting back to who I really am. Neptune will cloud your vision. You will feel like what's real, what's not real, what has meaning, like who am I kind of. And I feel like, I remember when I talked to you saying to you that sometimes like if I eat too much, or I feel like I get kind of like out of control and it's like I'm in this sort of, it feels almost like I'm possessed. And then it's like, I'll fall asleep so hard, like putting my daughter to bed. And it's like, I wake up and I'm like, where am I? What happened? And it's like I am under a spell. Like I really feel that way. And it felt very much like Neptune, and like Neptune is in my chart anyway. I kind of realized the role that it was playing and how, like talking to you and then talking to him, I like made this connection of like breaking out of this like relationship with food and my body was kind of like undoing like my karma, like looking at my chart, like, and like understanding this transit. Like it was so, that's the thing. I feel like I love astrology so much because I'll never get bored with it, because there's always so many dots to connect, like not just within astrology, but like talking to you and like looking at my life. And it's like, this is all making sense now. And like now it kind of has brought clarity and a sense of meaning to like all of this pain that I've experienced that has always felt so stupid and like kind of self-indulgent. Like really, like am I really that concerned with how I look and like food? Like this is so stupid, but I see how it actually has meaning and how it's about so much more than just
Oh, and
what
I
I
love
look
that you
like.
said that, like the whole undoing of the karma thing. It's not that you were like, just destined to live this terrible
painful,
karma. Whatever. It's like this stuff, it's all positive. I really see it that way. Like we are gifted challenges. And if we go through the challenge, go through the adventure, really even go through the fogginess and accept the fogginess, accept ourselves, acceptance of everything, you get something that you would not get if you didn't have those challenges. Like it's all purposeful, all beautiful.
And you can only get through them if you're willing to look at them and accept them and like sit with it and be like, just okay.
And that's the self-acceptance piece too. You're only going to get through any of this, like learning how to eat in a way that feels good. Like something as simple, or what we think maybe should be as simple as that. Or like be in a body that feels good. If you look at everything, if you look at the part of you that's like, oh, I really hate my body. And then the part of you that's like, oh my God, I feel so stupid for hating my body. Like all of this, all of this needs to be just looked at, just seen clearly.
And just accept it. And it's like, I feel like once you can just accept it, it's so much easier to move through it. I feel like so much of my struggle, why it's like taken me, I'm going to be 35 in May. Oh my God. Not that that's old. I just can't believe I'm going to be 35. I feel like I'm such a grown up. But it's like taken all these years because I feel like I've always resisted, like I resisted that part of myself that doesn't really like a lot of responsibility. I resisted the part of myself that, probably talks too much. It's like, whatever, that's who I am. And you know what, the people, like I just actually visited like my best friend from high school. She lives in Brooklyn and she's in New Jersey for the holiday. And I just saw her yesterday for the first time. I was like without my child and we were just able to talk. And I just had a latte and I was just talking so much. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. It's just all this caffeine and I haven't seen you in so long. And she's like, I love it. Like, don't apologize. Because like the people that like, she loves all of me, like that's why we've been friends for this long. I don't need to apologize for like being myself for like, and that's the thing with the moon sign too, which I love talking to people about their moon signs because it's like, it's such a natural part of yourself. Like we look at astrology as like, it's all a natural part of yourself, but your moon sign is like your instinctual self. It's you when you're not thinking. It's like your reactive self. Like I'm with someone who I know likes to talk with me and who I'm comfortable with and who loves me. I'm just going to talk and say what I want. And, I'm very much like a Gemini and like, it's like that for everyone with their moon sign. It's, whatever your moon sign may be, it's also like a part of yourself that you really need to, like honor and give space to. Because it can be easy to shut that part off, because it's really like your emotional inner life. But when you don't nurture it, it's kind of like you're shutting down your instinctual self, it's really sad when that happens. And it's easy to do that in a way, because I feel like we're kind of programmed to shut that part of ourselves off.
We absolutely are. And I think that we need to not look at that as like, oh, bad, and we've been programmed and whatever. Just like, okay, so we've been programmed. So exactly. How do we find our way out of this? And okay, I want to start tying things up. And I think that this is beautiful. This last sentence that I read, where you said, the truth is that an empowered woman would never be able to fall under a spell. She is too in love with the moment, too in love with herself, with life to be put under a spell. And I think that that's so accurate, because empowerment is simply like shedding light on everything, right? Like seeing every aspect of who we are and saying, like coming to a place of acceptance and love and curiosity.
And embracing it. Yeah,
exactly.
Like, this is who I am. And this is.
Yeah. And then that woman literally cannot be put under a spell, because there's nothing she can't see about herself, or nothing that she is unwilling to look at. Like that.
Exactly. I was just going to say, there's nothing she's hiding from.
Yeah. So a spell is impossible. And we've all been put under a spell, and it's not bad. It's natural. It's beautiful. This is the adventure. This is the journey.
Yeah. Coming out of the spell is like, that's exciting.
Yeah. And there are layers to it. It's not like, oh, at some point you're done and you're not growing anymore. Like, it's this ever unfolding adventure of self, like, because there's just so much to us. It's exciting. It's amazing, but you can get beyond the like dense base suffering of it all, where you're hiding from yourself, because I think that's the heart of the suffering, is where you're really hiding from yourself, or not willing to see yourself clearly, not wanting to see yourself clearly, wanting to be something other than you are. In that place, you're suffering. But once you let go of the resistance of it, it's just like continually undoing these spells, continually becoming lighter, continually enjoying who you are more, enjoying being in a body more, and then figuring out what you like, and it becomes more nuanced and it becomes more fun. And that's just beautiful.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yes. So what, for somebody who was going to come to work with you, how do you work with them with the moon cycles? How does it have to do with their nutrition and self-care? What are the benefits of somebody coming to work with you?
I guess with the moon cycles, I mean, I talk a lot about, when it comes to nutrition, if someone, cause I do just like readings,
right. Which is what I did with you at the beginning of the year. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. It's fun it can be fun to tie in like nutrition. And I mean, I guess I feel like I'm like getting allergic to the word nutrition for some reason. I mean, and it's like all over my website.
Stale. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels,
I mean, I'm not saying your website is stale. Your website is beautiful, but yeah, the word nutrition is starting to feel a little.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's more like self-care, like how you care for yourself. Like I feel like I'm always kind of changing how I look at this, because it is still in many ways like foggy in my head when I think about like food but anyway, but
I think that's beautiful, right? Like when things are foggy, it's like, okay, maybe that's not a direction you need to head, or maybe it's something that needs a little more clarity before you really, Totally.
And the cool thing about the moon cycle is that when you look at the moon cycle, they're like based on, because we are so connected to the moon, and the moon changes so frequently, and it's there are certain days where like certain foods would be favored, and it's, you kind of can get everything you would get all the foods within a week, if you were like, when the moon is in a water sign, like carbohydrates are favored. When it's in a fire sign, it's like protein or fruits. It's kind of weird and interesting, but what I try to do when I'm working with someone and talking to them about this, and even like understanding the different phases of the moon, like the beginning of the moon cycle is it's a stronger time where you would be more supported in cleansing, because you're going to have more energy. Whereas the end of the moon cycle is more of a like time where you would need more grounding and wanting to kind of go within. which can also be a good time for like, if you wanted to do a juice fast or something, not that I encourage people to do that unless, you know, they want to. But there are different phases of the moon that would be supportive for certain foods or different types of like eating, you know, cleansing or not cleansing.
And do you find that as people get more in touch with themselves, they sort of naturally are drawn to these things? Because that's definitely something, the biggest gift for me in working with you was realizing that I could trust myself, because you would be like, you know, today's a great day for this, or today is really supportive of that. And I would be like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm doing all the time. All the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really in touch with what's going on. But I also sort of wonder if you're not at that place yet and you're telling somebody, yeah, this is a really great day, your body would really be supported by a lot of carbohydrates, if maybe that gets them and is like with the intention of getting them in touch with their natural cycles and intuition, et cetera.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like whenever I do this with people, it's always to get them more in touch with their intuition and to kind of teach
to give them a diet,
how to trust their body. Because like on water sign days, it's interesting because on water sign days, you know, when the moon is moving through the sign of Scorpio, Cancer, or Pisces, people tend to be more emotional, and carbohydrates are very much a comfort food. So people tend to be more drawn to them. And the idea is that your body's going to respond to that more. So it may, if you are, you know, if you're eating bread and you have a gluten allergy, you might digest it better. You might not. It might be really obvious, like, wow, I really shouldn't do this. I should have had, you know, sweet potatoes or some other sort of, you know, it's just a way
it's never like, oh, I was bad. It was just like, oh, I tried this experiment. This is how it worked out for me. Maybe I'll shift it next time.
Exactly. And really that's what I try to, it's really, I feel like all that I do with this is I try to like teach people how to tune into themselves and tune into how the universe is communicating with them or would like to, and just kind of like developing your own, because it's such a personal thing, like what you eat and like, you know, this whole idea of like the universe speaking to you, like it's such a person, it's like a relationship you're developing. Like if you've never listened before, you know, it could come very easily, or you might need, you know, some sort of, I mean, obviously if they're coming to me, they want some sort of guidance on like, how do I interpret this? Like, how can I understand this?
Well, and I think it's important to understand too. And I'm always saying to people that you are the universe.
You are absolutely. Yes.
So essentially it's almost it's a self-communication. So it's not like, you know, that it's like you and God as separate entities. It's like, no, you are the universe. So it's you getting to know this bigger sort of macro picture of yourself.
Yeah. Like you don't have to go outside of yourself, or if like the idea of God is like scary to you, or just something,
or even the word universe, like essentially this is about getting in touch with yourself.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. I kind of feel weird about saying universe. I feel like it's just like, I don't know, because everyone says it. It's like
nutrition. It's getting stale.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so whatever. But yeah, I like that, getting in touch with yourself more, and how you're connected to, you know, the planets and nature, you know, how nature's connected to, like, it's really just about that. And the other piece of it is also looking at your chart and seeing, you know, what sort of like, I don't want to say what sort of diet is good for you, but what sort of like eating style would be more ideal for you in terms, like, for example, when after I had my daughter and I was like losing my mind trying to like, you know, do my usual cleansing thing, like when I was nursing and all of that, you know, I'm like, why do I need so much food? Like, what's my problem? Like, obviously I really didn't need to talk to an astrologer to figure that out. I was just not eating enough because I wanted to stay with what I had been doing before. And that's not really realistic when you're nursing a child or pregnant or any of that. But she told me, you know, based on my chart, you know, eating a lot of raw food is really great because I have a lot of fixed earth in my chart. I have a lot of Taurus in my chart, and that's a very like slow moving sign. So having like all of this, you know, juicy raw food is good because I don't have that much water in my chart, and water is like the cleansing element. So having more juices and more water, and even roughage, like she thought roughage was important, which I don't really agree with, but she was basically saying what I was eating was really right, but what I was doing in terms of like all the fasting was really not ideal for me, and actually like really bad for my psyche as like having all this Taurus, because it's all about abundance and being able to kind of like graze if you want to graze, you know?
Yeah. And if you had been willing to trust yourself in the first place, you probably would have done what she said naturally.
That's
so
exactly.
She was giving you
exactly.
to trust yourself.
I was really talking to her because I wanted permission to eat.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I was doing, which is really like, and I couldn't even admit that to I didn't even see it that way at the time, but looking back, I just wanted her to be like, eat a salad for lunch. You know, you don't have to keep having juice all day. Don't feel bad for having coconut water. Like, it was like kind of crazy how nuts I had become because it was like a time in my life, not to get back into all of this again, but like where I was so out of control with how I looked and how I felt because I had just had a baby and my body, I'd just done something that is, you know, insane. Like, I mean, it's totally normal, but it's also like, wow, like, look at me.
It's probably the most insane normal thing that happens.
It is, because it just is so, it's a wild experience. But yeah, I was totally just out of control of everything. So it was like, it's like that part of my mind that wanted to have so much control over my life and had control over nothing, for the most part, just kind of turned to that, you know, to food and how I look to kind of, I guess, feel some relief. I don't know.
Right. Well, it gives you a placeholder, right? Like all of this crazy obsession, like we're focusing on the surface gives you a sort of a place to focus so you don't feel so crazy. And really, we know now that it goes so much deeper than that. So when somebody comes to work with you, it's not like they're coming to get a diet. They're coming to trust themselves. They're coming to find a way to trust themselves, to trust life, to find the flow and the ease that we all want in our bodies and with food and with life.
Yeah, like understanding the cycles and the rhythm of the month, you know, and how that, you know, like merges with you, how it's, you know, how you can be one with that. And really it's really all about tuning into yourself. And, you know,
I mean, that takes us away from the rigidity of like, a diet and our food needing to look the same way every day or needing to be in a certain like calorie or density quotient. It gives us permission to have our own cycles and seasons.
Yep,
and
exactly. Yes, exactly. And, you know, I feel like it is like the whole, like focusing on real food and whole foods and all that is so important. And that's like the easiest thing to do, but it's like understanding yourself and how you can, because I feel like when I got into this, it was very much like, and probably you might feel the same way. Like it was all about the food. And now I feel like with wellness and just, you know, being healthy, like food is such a, like once you've understood, like this is what real food is, and these are the real foods that I like, and these are like the staples in my diet, it's like, you don't think about it very much.
No, it's just for the long supporting, it's meant to support the bigger picture.
Exactly. And it doesn't even feel restrictive, you know, like
be a total foodie about it, but like, you have to be, restrictive or obsessive or anything.
And even like focusing on like, okay, well, I'm going to have a green juice today. I'm going to have a big salad for dinner or whatever. It's not like, but I'm not going to have like bread or chips, or I'm not going to eat like the cake at the party for dessert. It doesn't even feel restrictive when you understand what you really need. It feels like I'm caring for myself.
Right. And not from like, if it felt uptight and you were like, I can't have the cake, and then your whole body seized up, then it needs to be looked at. But if it's like no big deal, you just know you're going to feel better, then you're fine. Like it's not what you're doing. It's sort of like who you are inside when you're doing it and where you're at on the journey.
Exactly. Yep.
So the very last question. So this is the Free Spirit Academy podcast, and I define free spirit as you when you just get to be you. So completely yourself in your skin. How do you define it? How do you define freedom, personal freedom, free-spiritedness for yourself?
I feel for me, it's like how I would define it for myself and for, you know, I guess others. I would feel like everyone needs to define it for themselves in a way. I guess I would just say feeling centered, like you are at home with yourself, you know, like you can feel who you are and you love who you are. You don't feel burdened by it or heavy. You know, you feel inspired by yourself, by being yourself, I guess. So like good. You just feel like you feel energized, doing what's natural to you. As opposed to feeling like, you know, there's something wrong with, you know, any aspect of yourself. You just
right,
embrace
because that
it all.
pulls you out of your center. I think
Exactly.
that's so beautiful because it's so different from this idea of moderation. So people sometimes they get into intuitive eating and they're like, well, just eat everything in moderation. But that's not necessarily coming from their center. That could be autopilot too. They could be totally on autopilot and just being like, well, I'm eating everything in moderation, whatever.
I can't eat everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Like I literally can't. Like it's not, that feels imbalanced to me. It feels stressful to me.
Which is why it's important to be in your own personal center so that you can flow and know what's right for you and not hide any part of yourself from yourself. I think that goes for the word balance or any of that. Yeah, it's much more alive and in tune and personal. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. I'm glad that you liked it because at first I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this well.
Oh, no, that's so perfect. And what is your website for anybody that wants to go check it out?
Oh, it's marlenatorres.com.
Awesome. And we will have that available for everybody to see. And we'll wrap this up. Thanks so much, Marlena. This was amazing.
Sure. Thank you. I loved it. Thanks for having me.